Hi, my name is Arenda Holladay, and I'm the instructor for a course that the Knitting Guild Association teaches called Basic Knitting. And I'm doing these series of videos that's kind of a companion to that course, but certainly not necessary that you're enrolled in the course or anything. Today, this video is going to be about lifted increases. And I have two photos of lifted increases, one where I've done them correctly and the other one shows some common pitfalls. So let's look at this one first. They are called lifted increases because when you work them, you lift the leg of the stitch in the row below, that's what that is, and you use it to make an increase, and on the right side you then knit the stitch. And the result is where this leg is lifted, that you get this line going up the side. And you can work them on the right or on the left. And it is a different technique for whichever side you're doing. And if you want something to be mirrored, that is, the same increase placed in the same place, same location, but slanting in a different direction, that is what you do. I use right on here, left over here. Now, when you form it on the left side, you knit the stitch first, and then you lift the leg of the other stitch and you work the increase. And there's a very common mistake that people make when they work this increase, and I'll discuss how to do that to recognize it. Now, this is a swatch that's larger, and I've done two things. So we're going to look at this portion first. Notice that on the right side, I have the legs and they're all extended, and I've worked this increase. But on this side, I've worked a lifted increase, but it doesn't match. And the reason for that is that when I lift that leg, I knit into it in such a way that it kind of twists the stitch instead of leaving this leg. Now it is a little less noticeable, so I don't know, there's no reason you couldn't use it this way for an increase, but if you want it to be matched, if you want it to be mirrored, you don't want to have this on one side and this on the other side, so I want to show you how to avoid that. Another common mistake I see with this increase is the placement. Now, I have a lifted increase here because I can recognize it by the lifted leg. There's one here, and there's one here. And they're not in a straight line. This one's over here. When you work this increase, decide where you want it. And part of making it be mirrored is you work it in the same stitch from the edge. So I have my selvage stitch, the next column in, that's where I'm working the increase. This one was worked in the fourth stitch, 1, 2, 3. So be consistent. Over here, I've done the same thing. Here's an increase, here's an increase, here's an increase. You can see that that line is disrupted and it is not mirrored. So on this side, I'm going to work 1, 2, and then in the third stitch from the end, I am going to work my increases. Now I will show you how to work these increases. And I've got a bit of the yarn here, and I'm going to work a right slanting increase in this stitch right here. And the right ones are a little easier than the left ones. The left ones are a bit more confusing because I'm going to be lifting. Here's my stitch, here's the stitch in the row below, and I'm going to be using this loop to form my new stitch. And the reason they call it lifted is that you can lift it up on that needle and then work it. But I find that that is problematic for a couple of reasons. One, it could get stretched out. And two, sometimes if you lift it up in a different way, you wind up working it so that the stitch isn't open. It's more common on the left side to do that, but I have seen it on the right side as well. What I generally do is I just insert my needle into the back of that loop where this stitch is coming from, and I'm trying to use just my needle tips and not stretch it out. And I've got the loop. There's the actual stitch, and I'm going to work it, and I'm going to give my yarn a little tug, which I always do when I do increases or decreases. Now I'm going to do the same thing except slant it left on the other side, and here's the third stitch. Now the problem with doing this on the left side is this is what I'm going to use. That's the leg of the stitch that I'm going to form the increase. But I got to get this stitch out of the way first before I can get there. So I'm going to knit that stitch. But look what it does. It moves that stitch, the one where I'm going to use the leg, to now 2 below. And if I tried to use this leg, it's in the same stitch, it won't let you do it. So I have no choice but to go down here. Now on this side, you do have to kind of lift it. Now when I do it, I try not to stretch it out. So I just insert my needle into that leg and I make the increase. And I find that doing it that way, you avoid a lot of the issues. So I have my right one here, I have my left one here. Let me show you an issue that can happen with the left one. And in my old YouTube channel, I have a video called How Not to Make Left Slanting Increases. And it shows this same thing, because this is not the way you want to do it. Now, as I said, you cannot do these on every row. You have to have a row between. Yes, you can do this on purl stitches, but it doesn't really matter whether if this is going to be the right side. It doesn't matter whether you do it to the right or the left, because it just looks the same. You just work that increase purl-wise, and I can show you that when I finish this. Okay, so I'm going to go here, and I'm going to make another lifted increase, and I'm going to make sure to remember I'm doing it in the third stitch. I just insert my needle into the back, so I'm not really lifting it at all, and I'm forming that increase. And when you do it that way, it just keeps it neat and tidy. It's not as large as the other ones, and these things, especially on the left side, can get really undone. Now, what I'm going to do here is show you a way that you want to avoid doing this. So I'm going to knit this stitch, and this time I'm actually going to lift this loop. And so I'm going to lift it on here. Now notice that if you know how to form twisted stitches, you do it by working this way into the front loop if it has this orientation. If I want to form this correctly, I will go into the back of the loop once I've lifted it, and that's going to create that leg that's going to match the legs on the other side. But if I lift it, and when I lifted it this way, if I work it this way, where I go into the front and I knit that stitch, what it's going to do is it's going to twist that leg. And to remind you, that's what's happened here. The leg is twisted so it doesn't match. And it all has to do with how you lift. And we'll go into this more fully when we talk about the M1 increase. If I lift it and put it on this way, and then I go into the front, it's going to twist it. If I lift it this way, it's not going to twist it. But again, I think you can already see just lifting that thing has gotten this whole thing all out of shape. I think the easiest way to make this is to just insert your needle into that leg, and then it's not going to stretch it out as much. It's going to be nice and neater. So I'm going to do one more row where I do these correctly. And just remember, you want to check if you're using the lifted method to make sure that you're not twisting that stitch. Now, I'm going to do, before I do the right side increases again, I'm just going to work over here to the center, and I'm going to do one on the purl side so you can see that you can use this same technique. Now if I'm doing one on the right, I just go into that purl bump and I form the stitch and then I knit it. And if you're doing this on the wrong side, you can see it's just going to look like 2 purl stitches next to each other. It doesn't matter whether you work it on the right or the left, and since it's so much easier to work it on the right, I would probably just go ahead and do that. It's not going to make much of a difference, but it does blend in very nicely with all of those purl stitches. So I'm going to work to the end here. Generally, when I'm doing increases in ribbing, if I am not doing them in the last row of ribbing, I use lifted increases on the first pattern row. Now you can see that lifted increase, it looks just like the other ones, looks just like the one on the left. And it's actually an easier way to do it than the left slanting, so I hadn't ever really thought of that before, but yeah. By making my increases on the wrong side, I can do that. All right, I'm going to just, again, locate the stitch below the stitch on my needle, and I'm just going to insert my needle into the back of that stitch, and I'm going to then work the stitch, give it a little tug, and then I'm going to go over to the left side. And I think that is an easier way, and it's less stress on the needle to do it that way. And now I'm on the left. I'm going to knit that stitch because I can't get to that until this stitch has been worked. And there's my loop. I'm just going to insert my needle there and kind of hold it and pull my loop through. And that's producing less stress when you make that stitch. Okay. Not a pretty swatch. And you can see what I did. Look how that just stretches the hell out of them when you play around with it. Okay,